Looking fancy.
All
Ready
right,
to
looks
go
like
here.
we're live.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you guys for waiting. I guess it's sort of common knowledge that things tend to start a little bit late here. But anyway, super pumped to be here. My name is Frank Corva. I'm with Bitcoin Magazine. This is Mr. John Dennehy, the founder of Me Premier Bitcoin. John has an incredible story, the work that he's done in creating Me Premier Bitcoin and how Me Premier Bitcoin has spread around the world as a platform or a curriculum or just, I don't know, however you want to conceptualize it. What it's become is quite phenomenal, so it's an honor to be here with him tonight at PubKey, to have him at PubKey here. I got the great opportunity to get to know John I guess it was a few months ago when I got to sort of interview him for a piece that I wrote. And one of the places that I want to start tonight is actually rewinding way before Me Premier Bitcoin, so you get some idea of what John was doing to try to help humanity before getting involved in Bitcoin and doing things the way he does them these days. So, John, if you don't mind, let's start as far back as you're comfortable going. Just a little bit of maybe the early 2000s, if you will.
And then Frank, before we jump in,
please,
as Thomas likes to say, this is a tavern
yes.
chat. So feel free to interrupt, ask questions. I spoke to some people in the audience. There are some educators here tonight. So we
please raise your
want
hand if you're an educator. Yeah,
include you in the conversation.
Awesome.
So
yeah,
please, there will be question and answer at the end, but don't feel nervous about interrupting in between. I've got a mic. I will come around, and you can have your minute of fame.
Amen. Yeah,
Thank
do
you.
that. And also, yeah, on that note, I would appreciate it. I was an educator both in public schools here in New York and at the college level for 12 years, so I don't like just talking to a room where nobody's talking back. So it's nice to have audience participation. So please don't hesitate to speak up. But let's just get started, John. How far do you want to take us back to give us some perspective on the work that you do now?
Well, first of all, thank you, Frank, and thank you, PubKey. Is this working? Yeah,
A little closer.
Okay. How about now?
Check, check.
One more time. I'm going to trade mics with you.
Wow.
Hello. It feels the same to me. I don't know.
That is a little weird, huh?
It's me. I think I'm the problem.
The mics are working.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, well, I don't know what's happening. You could tell I'm a technical person, right? Well, first, thank you, Frank, and thank you, PubKey, for hosting this evening. I think it's really important. We're going to go into my own personal history. I'm actually from New York, so this is a very nice event for me because most of the public work that I've done in Bitcoin has been since the last time I left New York, which was in 2021. I moved to El Salvador. And this feels like a full circle moment to come back to New York and talk about that work. So yeah, how far back to begin? I think I'll try to be quick about it, but as we are in New York, this is actually probably a good place to dive in on that. So I became an activist on September 11th, 2001. I was in Connecticut. I was 19 then, and I was at the University of Hartford. Fellow alum from UHA here.
That's
with us today. But it was close enough. New York was very close to me, even though I wasn't currently living there. I'd grown up in its shadow, still nearby, still had family that either lived or worked in Manhattan and felt very connected to what was happening on September 11th. And it was the first time that I thought about the world.
You may have had one or two thoughts about the world, but maybe sort of what was happening globally. I remember that day as well. I was actually downtown. I remember the day quite vividly, and it was the first time I heard about certain dynamics in the world, right? Certain political dynamics that led to what happened. Maybe that's a little bit more of...
Yeah, it made me question the world in a way that I never had before. Up to that point, I had accepted the world as it was without question. But September 11th made me start to ask, like, why? Why are things this way? and why do events like this happen? And that led me to the conclusion that things like this happen because people feel disempowered. People feel like they don't have control over their life. They don't have control over their present. They don't have control over their future. And we all seek that. So when we know that we don't have it, then not only does that set us down a negative path where we're subservient to others, and we're not motivated to teach and to learn, but for a certain subset, it makes us angry and frustrated, right? So that was September 11th made me into an activist, and one of the first targets that I had was the IMF, as this large multinational body that dictates to others, that takes sovereignty away from others. So I got in university at University of Hartford. I got very into activism. I completed my degree there, but I think in a sense I kind of dropped out after September 11th. I didn't really go to class that much, and in fact changed my schedule to build it around activism, and had sympathetic professors that I worked with in the activism realm who were my professors there, and were like, yeah, but you're like doing the theory that we talk about. You're doing it in real life, so like, yeah, we'll pass you.
That has to be kind of empowering. No, it's universities kind of feel monolithic to me. Like you sort of have to do things their way. You figured out a way to sort of make it work.
Yeah, University of Hartford was a good place. It's really where I, cut my teeth on activism. It's where many of my first arrests happened.
He's a man of many arrests, that John Dennehy.
Yeah, well, that's an important lesson that I learned then was we are only so free. Or let me rephrase that. None of us are free. But we don't.
Happy Monday.
Yeah. we don't realize where our cage ends until we push its bounds, until we push the edge of that cage. And that was the first time I touched the edge of the cage, right? So I was always attracted to permissionless activism. That always seems strange to me, to ask permission to dissent, right? Especially if you're asking to dissent against a government policy. You're asking like, hey, can I have your permission to disagree with you? Which always seemed just like, like a facade, like a show.
Getting a
Wow.
permit to run a protest or something like that.
Yeah. So I was always attracted to that. So even in activism that I did in Hartford, so I was the president of a student organization that organized protests. And as a point of principle, we never asked for permission, which meant that I got arrested a lot because the protests were by default, they were illegal, right? Just to dissent without asking for permission first made it illegal. So I found the edge of the cage there, right? And the police would come to my apartment. Like, it was known that I was an activist, so the police would have a noise complaint and, knock on the door and comment on the books that I was reading and refer to me by name. Like, they knew who I was. Like, it wasn't a noise complaint. So that was the first time I realized that I wasn't free, but none of us are free, right? None of us are free, and that eventually that leads to Bitcoin, and to these new tools that actually can free us.
So let's zoom forward a little bit. What was it, 2013? You find Bitcoin, or late 2012, early 2013. You find Bitcoin. This is. Did you see that through an activist lens right away as well? I think it was the Cyprus crisis, the banking crisis in Cyprus, that brought you to it.
Yeah, and there's an important life event between those two. So I moved, when I finished university, I moved to Ecuador, and I lived there and worked there. I worked for the government of Ecuador. I taught in a public university, and I also worked for a social program. So I had a bank account at their request. I was literally working for the government. So I had a bank account because they paid me via direct deposit to like the state bank. And a new government took over, which was hostile to the previous government, and they didn't recognize the visa that I had been granted by the previous government. And I was arrested and deported, and in that process, they seized all my assets, right? So like all the money that I had earned while I was living in Ecuador was taken from me, right? So I was already an activist. I already had thoughts about the state, but that personal experience gave me, a very personal reason to, or a personal experience that helped me see the benefit of separating money and state before I ever heard of Bitcoin, right? And then when I heard of Bitcoin for the first time, it was around the Cyprus bank bail-in in early 2013. So just as a refresher for
I was
people.
going to say, please give us a little refresher if you don't mind.
So basically, the government owed money, and their method for paying back that debt was to reach into all of their citizens' bank accounts, and they gave a haircut. I don't know what it was, if it was like 9% or something like that, but they took a flat rate out of everybody's bank account. And the first time that I heard of Bitcoin was an article about that crisis in Cyprus, and there was a throwaway line like Bitcoin users unaffected. And I was like, who unaffected?
I'm sort of amazed that the writer, even if that was just a sort of little quip in there, that's still kind of profound, no?
Yeah. So then I read the white paper, and it clicked immediately for me. By the time I finished the white paper, I was like, holy shit, this is so powerful. The potential is so high for this. I want to participate. I want to be a part of this. But it was because of that previous life experience. It's because I had my assets seized by a government. Not because I committed a crime, but because it's all arbitrary, right? Because like you not only are you not free, but you don't own the money that's in your own bank account, right? Like those two lessons I had already learned before I'd heard of Bitcoin. So as soon as I learned about Bitcoin, it immediately filled like a real need that I had, right? So yeah, I was fortunate that I think all of us have to understand the problem before we could see the solution. I had what seemed like the misfortune, but in hindsight was maybe the fortune of having some of those experiences that would help me see how Bitcoin is needed.
So let's fast forward a little bit, if you don't mind. We can get into a little bit about what you did with Bitcoin. I don't think it's as relevant to what you ended up doing in El Salvador in the early, when you first got into Bitcoin. But so, you understand Bitcoin come 2013, 2014. Continue to stay relatively involved, educate yourself, all that stuff. Pandemic rolls around. We see these draconian measures being taken around the world by governments around the world. Lockdowns here in New York. You're sort of literally and metaphorically sort of wandering, sort of wondering what are you going to do next? What strikes you? What do you choose to do come 2021?
So I was back in New York when the pandemic started. It's funny, even though I grew up in New York, I feel like as an adult this has been kind of a second home, but I've spent so much time out of New York, but it seems like a lot of these big life events have actually occurred here for whatever reason. Yes, I happen to, I was actually only in New York. I was living abroad, and I went to New York to have a hernia surgery, and I was going to recover at my parents' house. And the hospital closed the day after I had my surgery. It was just in there. So I was like, I'm just going to just recover here anyway. But that was actually part of my recovery, was to walk, right? To like try to walk a little bit further each day. But it happened to be in a world that seemed like it was collapsing, right? I was trying to walk a little bit further each day and into, you know, on deserted streets or in parks, whatever. But I thought a lot about the world again. It was another moment, maybe similar to September 11th, in that it made me take a step back and question, how did the world get this way? And if we wanted to take a different path, what would we do to diverge? And the conclusion that I gave to was similar, right? Similar conclusion. It's power. It's always power. And it's that we don't control our own life, right? And that was never so clear as during the pandemic. And I don't mean this taking one side or another with that. Like, it was just a time when where the world felt like it was falling apart, and we were all subservient to someone else. Regardless of how you reacted to the pandemic, it felt like we were all not in control of our own life. That there was somebody else that was deciding for us. That not only was somebody else deciding for us, but like we just weren't used to thinking for ourselves. Like, we just don't flex that muscle. And in times when it would be really useful to flex that muscle, we can't. So I spent a lot of time walking around and came to the conclusion, again, that the biggest problem that the world faced was that the individual did not have agency in their own life. And when the individual doesn't have agency in their own life, then there are a number of second and third order effects that come from that, all negative, right? If you're not in control of your own life, then it disincentivizes you to plan, to build, to create, to look into the future. All of these things require you to look into the future. And if you are not in control of your own life, then you definitely are going to have a lot of trouble predicting the future. And if you're having trouble predicting the future, then it's hard to plan toward that. But if you could flip it, right? And this is the solution. So that's the problem. The solution is introductory Bitcoin education. Because if you realize that it doesn't have to be this way, that you can take control, that you can have agency, that you can control your money, and money and power are synonymous, right? So if you can control your money, you can control your power, you can control your present. And if you can control your present, then you could better predict the future. If you could better predict the future because you have this baseline and you know at least you know what you're gonna do, right? Like, maybe you can't have total control over the future, but like you could have more than previous. Then that flips the incentive structure, and now you are motivated to plan, to build, to create, to look further into the future. So the problem was lack of agency in our life, and the solution was to give it back. And the method for doing that is Bitcoin education, but more than just Bitcoin education, introductory Bitcoin education, bringing new people into the space, and more than introductory, independent and impartial. Not telling people you must use product A or use exchange B or whatever it is, or that this is a way to have more dollars, but that Bitcoin is a tool to give power back to the individual. So to teach Bitcoin in that way, which is not how, again, going back to incentives, and like we'll probably get into funding and finance later, that's not a foregone conclusion that that's how Bitcoin will be taught. That is not how Bitcoin will be taught unless we take charge and we decide that's how it will be taught. So yeah, during the pandemic, that kind of clicked. This is the problem, and the solution is Bitcoin education. Bitcoin education done in a specific way, in a certain way.
Can I ask a question there? I've heard this story before, but I never actually questioned here. So you decided that that was the way the education was going to go from the onset. That wasn't something you learned from feedback from getting started with the education. You didn't realize that later. You said no, it has to be done in this sort of grassroots, independent way from day one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Please continue. So your journey then takes you not necessarily to El Salvador right away. You actually go back to where you had spent some time, Ecuador. And I think that's where you've tried to get what would become Me Premier Bitcoin off the ground initially. So maybe touch on that quickly before we get to El Salvador.
Yeah. So in early 2021, I think January, I moved. I previously lived in Ecuador, so I moved there with this idea already to do something with Bitcoin education. And it didn't work. It didn't work. I mean, the idea was probably not as fleshed out as it needed to be, but a big part of it was I was very interested in in-person learning. Like, it's from the start, interactive learning has been a big part of it. To learn by doing, not just theory, but have people actually using Bitcoin and learn about it by using it. And the pandemic was still happening, and it was, among other challenges, it was hard to gather Ecuadorians in a physical space. So that never really took off. I tried to teach, just some friends of mine, which I hoped would then become teachers, but it wasn't the right time and it wasn't the right place.
So while you're there, that's when you hear news about El Salvador now is going to adopt Bitcoin, legal tender, all this stuff happens. And now, just to make sure I have the timeline right, what is that, May 2021? June, okay. So June 2021, El Salvador announces this thing. You hear, okay, El Salvador is Bitcoin country. I guess I got to go to Bitcoin country to do this. Tell us a little bit about that trip. What were the early days like in El Salvador?
Yeah, so I moved to El Salvador in August 2021. So the way that law works in El Salvador is once a law is passed, it goes into effect 90 days later. So the law was announced and passed in June and went into effect in September. So I moved there in August. So I moved there before the law went into effect, which was kind of important for me just to be able to gauge a before and after, to have like a baseline so I could measure progress against a before time. And it was really cool those first days. It felt like university. It felt like college in a sense, because I met other people who had moved. Either they had moved to El Salvador for, they were Bitcoiners, or they were checking it out and possibly were going to move, but there was a lot of curiosity and interest. So in those early days, it was easy to meet other Bitcoiners who were just curious about what was happening and maybe wanted to contribute in some way. And I'd say that it was like college in that it was really easy to make friends in that circle. Like we were all like, hey, you're new here too. Like, hey, let's like, I don't know, let's be friends.
I feel like even more fun than college in some ways is like you don't have all the academic stuff overhang in the background or whatever. We're just gonna talk Bitcoin and hang out in a new country together. Here we go.
Yeah, and one thing that surprised me a little bit. So I went to El Salvador with a plan. It wasn't entirely fleshed out, but it was like, there was a mission statement, there was a website, there was a plan. I thought that I was gonna find many others like that, but it was actually there was a lot of curiosity. I thought that I might attach myself to an existing project that already had, its feet under itself. But I guess that's what everybody thought.
So you were tasked with creating that project that everybody else was going to attach themselves to then.
Yeah, there were a few projects early on, and this is an interesting like anecdote. Um, so there were a couple of other people that wanted to start education projects, and there were a couple of people that just wanted to start projects generally with Bitcoin, and none of them ever got traction. Like I'm talking maybe I was aware of maybe 15 other people that tried to start things.
Is that right? Something comparable to what you did?
Yeah, or not all of them were education. A couple of education, but other projects like to help people move down, whatever it was. And I think an important difference was all the other projects prioritized money and recognition. So getting a legal structure in place and getting, financial stability in place or find a sponsor, whatever, to get things kicked off, and then the proof of work, right? That was how everybody else approached it. We approached it, let's just start teaching people and figure out the rest later. And then people donated because they were like, oh, I love what you guys are doing. Like, how can I support? I don't know. I guess you could donate. And we didn't ask for permission, so that was just
Worked out.
Yeah,
Okay.
that worked out.
So I want to get into now how things were formed, but I just want to make sure we just sort of got you up to speed as to how we got started here in the early days. Any questions or anything thus far? Anything going through anyone's mind here? Yeah, in the back. Yep.
Impartial is very clear. Oh, thanks. The impartial part, you went, so no tool specifically. Can you just talk a bit about what the independent side of it means more, please?
Yeah.
Great question.
And we say independent and impartial, even though there's a lot of overlap between the two terms, because we really want to emphasize it, right? It's an example of our independence, and this is, I don't know if we're gonna follow a linear timeline, but maybe we'll circle back to this. But recently, the government of El Salvador has entered into a loan agreement with the IMF. Because we are independent, I have not censored my thoughts about that. Others are less independent, and they've had to censor their thoughts about that. So impartial, maybe we could refer to the materials and how we teach the materials, but independent is we are not subservient to anyone, including our funding sources. In fact, that's not entirely true. We were just talking about this upstairs. I think that we are subservient to our funding sources, but our funding source is you, right? Our funding source is the community. So if we disappoint the community, then they'll stop donating. But if we cannot, no government, no corporation, no moneyed interest has any control over us. And that's how we're independent. So impartial maybe is how we relate to students, and independent maybe is how we relate to the world.
Great question. I'm curious, your background as a teacher, what sort of teaching do you do?
Yeah, I taught, or I created online courses for a company here in New York, actually, in the data science space. So I was helping other professors and people in the tech space create courses, and then I did some teaching myself, like online courses mostly, and now we're creating an offshoot of actually your 1 hour course. So
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Super cool. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So yeah, part here that I sort of love learning more and more about. Each time I get to speak with John, I get more of the story. But the early days of this, starting to relate to people, finding teachers to teach it, because I know another big thing with Me Premier Bitcoin is having locals teach other locals, not necessarily John being the person that everybody looks to or whatever, some other higher up within the program. And then also if we could touch a little bit on how the curriculum developed. A lot of curriculum ends up developing from trial and error, and I know a lot of teachers here probably can attest to that. So just figuring out what works along the way. How long did it take to come up with something that you really felt was like, okay, this is now the 10-week course?
Yeah, so we started in the first weeks, months, then we just had an intro class, which was something that I made the V1 version of. I don't think it was very good, and it was really just an excuse for people. Like the first classes were just people teaching in their own community, so it was kind of an excuse to have a conversation rather than they were, I think, really relying on that.
Was it more like, let me show you this thing that someone created and just that's like a starting point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It was pretty anarchaic in the beginning. It still kind of is to some extent, but we have a lot more of like a formal structure. But then it was just so when we first got started, we paid teachers per student to do everything. So to find the student, to find a location to teach the student, and to have the class.
They were
And
paid for each of those things.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the teachers were they did everything, right? That was the initial model. The initial model was also we distributed some sats to the students as part of the class. They would, make a transaction and they would keep the sats. That didn't really scale as we taught more students. Then that was just expensive. So we had to cut that.
Give me those sats back. We're gonna keep practicing. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, it was also, I mean, I'm an idealist, right? I was like, what if we got all these donations and we could just redistribute Bitcoin to El Salvador? Like if we could take money from a place like New York and redistribute it to El Salvador. And we are, right? Just not like, we can't do it on the scale where we're right, those students. So so that was the first program. And then because there wasn't there was no Bitcoin education in the country, like literally none. Some schools started to approach us, directors at schools, principals, that said, I'd like my students to learn about Bitcoin. We're not aware of any program, like an official program from the government, but you guys are doing something, so can you teach our students? And one of the first schools that did that, they had an existing diploma program for their students, which was a 10-week program, and they had a number of different subjects, right? Like you could learn how to. I think one of them had to do with cooking, and another was, I don't know. They had like 5 or 6 diploma programs already, and they had a structure. They had a structure specifically that it was 10 weeks already. So they asked us, like, can you make a course that would fit our existing structure, which is this 10-week program? So this was in February 2022. And we said yes, and he said, cool, we'll start in April. So I think we had 6 weeks to put together a team and create the curriculum. It probably would have taken us as long as we had, right? If we had 2 years, then it would have taken us 2 years. But we had 6 weeks to build a team and have the team build the curriculum.
Was there a
So
certain
that's how
amount?
long it took.
And financially, that's something to work out there as well. 6 weeks, you have to get this thing done. Did you have the funding to do that, or did you have to
No.
sort of put a call out there?
We had no money. We had no money, but we said yes, right? Like, we'll figure out the rest later.
How big was the team at this point?
The team was probably 5 or 6 people. And we started to raise money. So this was not long after the Canadian trucker protest, which they raised a bunch of money on Tallycoin. Yes, thank you. So
Which
did
no
our
longer
first.
exists, by the way.
What's that?
What was that?
Which no longer exists, by the way.
Was that the thing that did it
Tallycoin
in?
shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, after that.
So we used Tallycoin, and we had a budget, and we raised 1.5 Bitcoin, which at the time I think was like 60 grand or something. for this whole program for a year to build it, to hire the staff, to teach it in, the first 1,000 students, whatever it was. And yeah, so it was community funded from the start, right? That was the first. Before that, we had gotten a donation here and there, but this was like our first like major campaign that we did to raise money, and we raised 1.5 Bitcoin for the first year of the program. And then, so it's important to note that every 10 weeks, we built a new Bitcoin diploma.
I was going to say that went on. There was a new iteration for how many 10-week periods did you do that for?
So the first year in 2022, we had 3 cohorts. So there were 3 versions of it that first year. And in fact, the first version, we weren't finished when the course began. So the first version is actually in 2 parts. It's like the first 4 weeks and then weeks 5 through 10. Like we were still building it when
for the record, I would do that for my college courses that I taught. I'd be like, yeah, we got weeks 1 through 7 ready to go, and now we do the rest.
Yeah. And then we open source. So that first year was really cool. We grew super quickly that first year. So every 10 weeks, we doubled the number of schools and students that we taught the Bitcoin diploma at. So to put it a different way, every 10 weeks, we taught the number of students that we taught more than had been taught in history when that 10-week period began. So we did that a few times. And then by the end of the year, we were pretty confident with it. So then we open sourced it. Like V1 wasn't open source because we didn't even have it ready for the kids, right? So what would have been like the V3 is when we were like, okay, this is probably good enough to share. And now we just update it once a year. So this is actually the 24 edition. But once a year we come out with a new edition now. And it's we're not making like massive changes at this point.
I remember you saying that. Has anybody used it? Has anybody taught the Me Premier Bitcoin curriculum here? No? Okay. Yeah. In terms of, so let's go through those 3 10-week iterations. So now we're at what, the latter part of 2022?
By the third one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Where are things at now in terms of not only Me Premier Bitcoin spreading in El Salvador, but globally? Have people started to adopt it elsewhere at this point?
Yeah. So by the end of 22, we didn't see much traction internationally. That started in 23, but pretty early in 23. There was interest. There was some early interest from. You might see what independence I'm talking about. There started to be interest from the government. So we had an early conflict with the government because we didn't ask permission to go into the school system. They didn't. They thought we should have. And in fact, they told us to stop the program. And we called their bluff. And we said, we will, and we'll tell everyone why. And they were like, all right, let's just work together. It was a bit more like stressful than how I just retold it.
We have a follow-up question.
Was it like a department, or was it who told you no?
The Minister of Education.
Wow. Okay. So it was like a committee led by a single person, kind of thing, or?
Yeah. I mean, there's no government in the world that wants people to like challenge their authority, right, and challenge like their monopoly on, in this case, education. So by the end of the year, the government had started to become interested in Bitcoin education, and we were actually part of a larger coalition that was talking with the government to try to create curriculum for them, so the Ministry of Education could teach their own, their own curricula. But what happened was it wasn't a very productive working group. There was a lot of infighting. This was also Bitcoin was entering a bear market, which is, I don't know if many of you guys work in the Bitcoin space, but all of a sudden everybody's your friend in a bull market. When you get in a bear market, all of a sudden it's like this zero-sum game where everybody's like fighting each other.
Everybody's less happy.
Yeah. So we actually quit that group by the end of 2022, like kind of out of protest. Like we're tired of having meetings about when the next meeting is going to be and who's going to be in the photo op. We have, like, we're already working in the schools. We're already doing this. Like, we don't need to have these endless debates that lead nowhere about who gets credit for what. So we dropped out of the group, and early 2023, fast forward a couple of months, the group was going to launch the program in the school system, and turns out what they had created was kind of shitcoiny.
What is a little more details here? Are we shilling Ethereum? Or are we talking about making our own tokens?
Yes, both. Okay. Not to a large extent, but it was kind of like sprinkled in there, and so that was scrapped kind of the last minute. And the Bitcoin office was new. The Bitcoin office started
2023, right?
Yeah. It was announced in November 2022, and I guess maybe they actually like started in early 23. And one of the first things they did was like, we're not going to let this curriculum go forward.
Interesting. Okay.
And then they asked us, like, hey, you guys already have something, and it's open source. Could we just use that? And so we said yes. And then we started working with the government. And we trained. Also, Bitcoin Beach worked with us.
Just a quick preface. I don't want people to get lost. The Bitcoin office, for those who don't know, in El Salvador, is headed by Stacy of Max and Stacy fame, Stacy Herbert. And yeah, it's been around. I interviewed her on the 21-month anniversary. So it's only 2 years old or so, right? Hasn't been around for super long. They do other programs that they actually run. I think like Kubo Plus. Other things as well, but they worked with Me Premier Bitcoin without having any influence over Me Premier Bitcoin. Just wanted to give that context for those who maybe did not know that. Yes.
Yeah. So in 2023, they asked us if, and again, they didn't need to ask us because it's open source, but they asked us if they could use it, and we said yes. They modified it slightly, like they put Chivo Wallet in. Chivo Wallet is the government wallet, which we do not have in our version. They inserted that in their version, but it's like a modified version of what we had developed, and we started to teach. It was probably a year and a half, so 2023 into 2024, we trained 500 public school teachers to teach the Bitcoin diploma, and they are doing that now. So then. We trained them, and then we followed up with them. So we would go and like sit in on their class and make sure that they were
give them notes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
So we did that from 23 and 24. In 24, and I guess I'll just wrap up like government involvement. We've done a bunch of other stuff, but that's maybe a separate thread. The end of last year. So we'd never wanted to work with the government, right? Like we were somewhat reluctant to work with them because that's just not our MO. I didn't get into Bitcoin because I like governments. But it's a tool. Everything is a tool. Like if we want to teach more people in the nation, they have tons of employees. So if we could orange pill the education department, that is a much faster way to orange pill the country.
So, as someone who interfaces with government myself, I think people tend to look at government as very much a monolithic thing. It's impenetrable. You can't do anything with it. It just is what it is. But I think on a more local level, when you actually work with people, maybe to the degree that you sort of realize, okay, I can get through, and I don't really have to compromise anything here. It's just a conversation, teaching someone how to do some bureaucrats or some people who work, civil servants or whatever like that. Did you find did you find it to sort of just be like, yeah, just more people that I'm teaching. It's not necessarily a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, a breakthrough for us was, these early meetings. And this was after we knew that they were just going to take a modified version of the open source curriculum that we created. There was still like some friction. And a big breakthrough for us was actually, excuse me, sorry. A big breakthrough for us was to just treat them like students and treat them like regular people. And we realized, like, wait, you guys don't understand Bitcoin. Let's forget all the strategy that we're talking about for the department. Let's give you the course, right? So we gave all of the management at the Ministry of Education, we taught them the Bitcoin diploma. And then the meetings got a lot better, right? then things flowed a lot better after that.
Did a genuine sort of bond maybe sort of form as those aha moments happened? Were they grateful for the work that you were doing, and did that sort of create a better dynamic?
Yeah, and they understood it. Before that, somebody told them, we're going to start to teach about Bitcoin, so work with these guys. Right after that, they were like, oh, I could see why people should know about this. Yeah.
Especially as the country is center stage in the world for Bitcoin and Bitcoin adoption. Yes. Daniel, do you have a mic for this gentleman here? Yeah. Thank you.
All right, no problem. I don't know if this is working. Yeah, you're good. All right, cool. Just wanted to let everyone know, Mr. Dennehy here is an excellent barefoot golfer. So
Okay.
Fun fact.
A little side note.
Fun fact. So my question kind of surrounds.
Yeah.
No.
You can have your microphone back. Thank you.
So, kind of like, I guess you would call it the or like how would you word it? Like how they send people to jails and stuff. I just watched a documentary on this, like a few of them, where they send hardened like MS-13, 18 criminals, like the worst of the worst, into a cell with 80 people in there. They're never allowed out. Only to just do some exercise every once in a while, down to other criminals where they're actually able to like fish or farm, and they're lesser sentences and stuff like that. So I guess we'll try to like do a Bitcoin thing, but so what do you think about that system, being that you live there, and how it kind of compares to what we have here at Rikers Island? And then secondly, is there any way that you can tie in, because they're learning stuff. No, they're learning stuff to get them back into society, right?
Yeah.
So is that, I mean, you've had a lot of trouble with the government, but is that something that you would consider? Like maybe training them on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, we want to teach everyone Bitcoin. So we, two comments on that. So to give, this will probably require me to give an outline of the node network. So in 2023, March 2023, so 2 years ago, we started the Independent Bitcoin Educators Node Network. So this is a way we created an infrastructure for Bitcoin educators anywhere in the world to plug into the materials that we had created and frameworks that we had created, and to work together, right, to share best practices and all that. And this is, I don't know if this is going to come up more in depth later, but it's we should talk about that. It's now self-governing. Decentralization is very important to us. So it's now self-governing, and it has nodes, more than 60 nodes in 39 countries at this point. So one of them, there's actually a few in the United States. One of them is a project that's called From Bars to Bitcoin.
Oh, I didn't know that. You work with Justin.
Yeah.
Justin, Redrick.
Yep. Yeah. So, or you know what? I don't even think they're a node in the network. Are they a node? I'm not sure. We work with them. I'm not sure if like it's official or again anybody could use it. I think they have applied and we accepted them. But they have a program. So they began to teach it to inmates, the Bitcoin diploma to inmates here in the United States. And in fact, I don't know if this has gone out yet, or if I'm allowed to say this.
But their investor, is that where you, sorry, keep going.
No, Frank's got some other information about them. No, but it's facilitated by a grant from Blocks. Is that what you're talking? No.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was anything
Yeah.
more. Yeah, continue.
So they are actually every inmate in the United States prison system, which is about 2 million people, receives or will soon receive a notepad, and it will have the Bitcoin diploma on it. And they will be managed in this program to teach every inmate in this country about Bitcoin as a tool for when they get out, like a tool that maybe could help them, adjust to the world. So we aren't really doing that, but there is a program to do that in the United States. We don't currently have a program in El Salvador, but this would be the sort of thing that we wouldn't actually do. But if somebody wanted to do it, then we would kind of help however we could. But it's not something that we would necessarily do on our own. If there was an organization in El Salvador that was educating prisoners in that system, then we might want to work with them rather than us work with like the prison bureau directly.
Super interesting.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add to that piece with Justin as well. They're teaching Bitcoin mining, and how can you get jobs within this space that do not require certain education components as well as other things, right? So we anticipate the space to grow and mining to continue to be that background. Then with little to no technical skill, you can start to enter into this arena just by learning. So you have a comprehensive understanding of Bitcoin from an introductory perspective. You have that rehabilitation component, and then we know from a recidivism perspective, you now do not necessarily have to worry about, can I get a job? You are equipped. And through other partnerships and things that they have, they're sending people that are getting out returned citizens to various places around the U.S. that have mining equipment set up. So when you look at tech positions and all of these things, you now can have a mid 5-figure to potentially 6-figure job that could be waiting for you, that could support you, support your family, etc., instead of potentially returning to some of the things that put you there in the first place. So that's a very important piece as well to that strategy, not only education, but then how can we turn this into a job/entrepreneurship opportunity.
Is that is that LFG mining?
Yeah, LFG.
Got it. Yeah, they're doing. If you get a chance, follow them on X or look them up. I don't know whether they accept donations, whatever support, but they really do. It's mind-boggling work. It's really, really amazing work. And I think that component is really, really big too. It's often not talked about without going on that tangent, but yeah, finding work in the Bitcoin space. I don't know if you guys don't touch on that within Me Premier Bitcoin, right? It's just education based.
Yeah, so we try to stay very focused, right? We tried not to fall into the trap of attempting to do everything for everyone. So for continued development after they go through our programs, we'd prefer to partner with a program that will connect them with a job rather than be the ones to provide it, because we are very focused. I think that's another reason why we've been successful and maybe others haven't been, because we've kept a very narrow focus. It's just introductory, empowerment-focused Bitcoin education, period.
You've never thought about extending past that 10-week period then? Just so at this point, when we think about, let's talk about this way, when you think about growing what Me Premier Bitcoin is, what does that look like in your mind if it's not branching out to do other things aside from introductory Bitcoin education?
Yeah. So we are growing pretty quickly, and the two ways that we are growing are with materials and infrastructure, and then internationally. So materials and infrastructure, we are, I don't know, a couple of weeks away from launching a youth curriculum, which didn't really turn out how we hoped, so we're probably going to have to redo it. We were building it with a partner for the public school system in El Salvador, and it's turned out to be much more El Salvador specific than we anticipated. So our initial intent was to just open source that and share it with everyone, but we're probably going to have to make a new one that is
Another iteration, maybe.
Yeah, like build off of that rather than just release that. We're also working with educators that are just starting to create versions of the Bitcoin diploma. So there's a couple of different versions of the Bitcoin diploma. There's an organization here in the United States called Bitcoin Veterans, and then within that, Operation Bitcoin, and they are focused on educating military veterans about Bitcoin. So they've added a couple of things that are relevant to veterans to the Bitcoin diploma, and we're actually trying to lean into that by making it easier for people to kind of like choose your own adventure with it, and you could modify it slightly for that demographic, whether it's potentially prisoners, or one of the other things that there's a group doing this is for senior citizens. For like more advanced ages, we're going to build one that is more remedial, so similar material but like lower reading level. So we're building out in different directions. We're also, in the past year, we've built a learning management system. So on our LMS, we are leaning more into online and making a lot of the stuff that we built for a physical space to make it online. We now host unconferences, which are like, if a conference and Bitcoin got together, what would they look like? That's kind of what the vision is. So they're decentralized, and it's just focused on Bitcoin education. In fact, I'm wearing this Bitcoin Park hat because that's where I'm going after New York. I'm going to Nashville because Bitcoin Park is hosting the next unconference, which will be April 10th.
Yeah, if I could give a shout out to that too. I went to the unconference before the Bitcoin conference last year in Nashville. For anyone who especially is maybe thinking about, I guess either doing the course or maybe teaching the course or just wants to learn more, the unconferences, this is the fourth one you've ever done, right? This one coming up? Fifth, sorry. They really are a really great place to not only absorb information, but even contribute a little bit. If you want to get up in front of people, share what you do, understand maybe a way that you've applied the educational materials, or the way that, we have some educators in the room, the way that you approach education. Because I think I was having a conversation with someone here at the bar this Saturday night, an educator like myself who was an English as a new language teacher, or English as a second language teacher. And there's always sort of best practices to learn about how to sort of do your mini lesson and then get people to sort of break out into groups and practice something. There's always different ways. Everyone has their own style to teaching, and the unconference was a really special thing. In the 12 years that I spent teaching, I don't think I'd ever saw anything in the education field that was really like it. So just as a shout out to anyone, I don't think anyone here is from Nashville or is going to fly down there maybe next week, but just something to keep an eye out for, because I have a strange feeling knowing, yeah, the founder of Me Premier Bitcoin is going to be there, but no, just as Me Premier Bitcoin has expanded, I have a feeling the unconference will as well. So something to keep in mind.
So that's the first way is we're just building out this infrastructure and materials, but the second way that we're growing is more people are using it, right? So we're setting up more chairs for people to sit down in. And the unconference is so first the node network. So in order to join the node network, you have to agree to a core set of values, and that is that the education is independent, impartial, community-led, Bitcoin-only, quality, and focuses on empowerment. Right? We're not teaching people how to get rich. We're teaching them how to be free. So long as you agree with those core values, you could apply, and the network itself, which is now self-governing, will either accept or reject. So we're building out more tools, and actually the Unconference is somewhat born out of the Node network, because we have these monthly general assemblies, virtual, where we get together and we share best practices, like, hey, this is what I could help with. I'm actually a teacher trainer by trade. So, hey, if you guys need teacher training, then reach out to me. Like, it's everybody's kind of pitching in and helping each other. And that was one of the motivations for the Unconference, was like, what if we just did this in person and we just kind of traveled around the world and hosted these spaces where educators could come together and share best practices and leave inspired and stronger than they were when they entered. But we've also open sourced the Unconference, right? So we shared how we run an Unconference, how much it costs us, like 90 days out, this is what we do, 75 days out, this is what we do, 60 days, whatever. We open source that whole process. And in fact, this year, I believe there will be Unconferences potentially in Argentina and Indonesia. And there's a conference in Alaska, which is going to be like a hybrid sort of version that we'll have nothing to do with, right? These are people that have been to the Unconference, and we've kind of maybe walked them through how they might have their first one, but like we're not actually involved, right? So that's another way that we're expanding. We're trying to build the tools, but we're trying to also create the frameworks that allow more people to come in. So as an example, we have a new block every month where education projects could apply. And last month, I think we added 6 new projects from 6 different countries. So like that 39 countries in 2 years, a lot of it is recent. It's actually accelerating.
Truly made yourself a question, yeah? Yeah.
I think it's
I think the mic sort of like warms up as you talk into it, to be honest.
I think it's I'll just shout.
Yeah. I can repeat it as well.
I think it's awesome that you're teaching all of these school kids about Bitcoin. I've done a couple of trips to El Salvador so far this year, and in my experience, most of the adults that I talk to either don't care or don't understand Bitcoin, even though it would directly benefit them. Like, so many people queue up at the bank for remittances and crazy stuff like that.
Yep.
Like, how can the Bitcoin community help to address that education gap? And is that something that your organization is going to be doing as well?
Did you get all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How can we address the education gap? You mean like that? So maybe like the interest gap. That
You're saying it's easier to it's easier, well, technically if they're in schools or they were in schools doing that work, it's easier to get through to the kids. Also, kids are maybe more digitally native. Adults are more set in their ways, whether it's getting online to queue up, like you said, for a remittance payment, something like that. Just maybe a lack of interest, maybe more skepticism. I don't know if that's fair to add into the mix there. Okay. So I think that those things there. So how do we address that? How do you reach those adults?
Yeah. So we do teach adults, right? We don't just teach in the school system. And in fact, we're leaning ever more toward the grassroots and just teaching in a place. Like if PubKey was in El Salvador, we'd have classes here, right? Every place that is like this in El Salvador, we have classes at. So I think the way that we address it to the adult population, and adults are, I have a theory that it's the reason why I don't have a house, why I don't own more than I could carry in my like in one bag when I get on a flight. As we get older and we become part of the system, then we become blind to its evils, right? So I have personally consciously chosen to never really be part of the system in order to never lose that perspective. But I think that's a thing that we see with a 15-year-old compared to a 50-year-old. The 15-year-old is quite open to something new. The 50-year-old is like, yeah, but like I bought a house and I want the value of that house to continue to go up. And you're saying that that's like it's all on shaky ground? No, I don't like that. I don't think it is. So I think it's always the youth is always going to be more open to this, and I think the youth is a way to reach other ages as well. So if you could teach that 15-year-old, that 15-year-old goes home and talks to the 50-year-old in a better way than we can, right? Because they're going to relate to them. They know how to relate to them better than we ever will. So if we could reach all the teenagers, then I think we actually end up reaching a lot of the adults as well, which isn't to say that we're not open to directly teaching adults. In fact, we teach quite a few, but the interest level is probably higher as you probably teenagers are the ones that are the most curious about it and the most open to it. Like it's funny, the Bitcoin diploma, there's no maximum age, there's just a minimum age, right? Like a 4-year-old can't use it, but it seems like it actually gets harder with age, right? Like what the teenagers, because sometimes they're like, oh yeah, but you made this for like teenagers in the school system. Where's the adult version? Be like, this is the advanced version. Like for you, this is the advanced version.
Can I just make a quick introduction
Please,
here?
yeah.
So joining us tonight in the audience, a gentleman named Anderson, who reached out to us. I mentioned this on Spaces a little earlier. Reached out to us a few weeks ago. He runs a school in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy. I think it's K through 8, or is it K through 12 now, right? K through 12, and he brought in a group of students. They were all really interested in learning about Bitcoin. They chose PubKey as their enrichment program. And so I invited him to come back tonight to meet you, John, and I wanted to just say thank you again for joining us. I learned a lot from speaking to you and your students, and I'm sure that you guys have a lot more questions, so we'd love to have you back again.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, I was actually about to say I heard that you might be coming, and I wanted to make sure that you at least got a question here, or that we at least got to hear what's going through your mind as you're listening to all this. So please share.
No, I want to build first. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for your vision. Because we definitely get the empowerment model, right? I mean, that's why we have the school is to give you the tools to run your life the way you want to run it. And to build off the question in the back, you know, when Nabisco wanted to get Oreo into China, they gave it to the kids, and the kids took it back to their parents. Right? Same thing with recycling, right? We've been recycling in New York City 30 years, and we taught it in the schools, and the kids went back and said, no, Mom, no, Dad, you got to put this here, you got to put that there. And you're right, like the second you get stuff, like we have the, you know, Amazon accounts, right? We've got the streaming accounts. The second we get stuff, we want more stuff, and we don't want to give it up. And the youth are always questioning, they have their mind open, and it's very important that it's us that can sometimes poison them and damage them, saying, oh, you have to have money, and you've got to do this, and you've got to buy it, you've got to go vote. And they're like, can you prove to me that works? So I think, no.
That was a heavy statement.
But it's true. Like, they go, you've been saying this, and where is the proof that this works? So, I mean, we've got to have these spaces, because they challenge us all the time, and we just can't practice adult supremacy. We got to say, well, let's really examine that. Let's really be, if we're really serious about education, then we've got to be serious about inquiry. And I think that's what you're doing here. So thank you for the path that you've decided to take.
I have to say thank you just to hear your voice and the way you speak. I used to train teachers in New York through Hunter and Teachers College, and I dealt with a lot of heads of schools and stuff, and I met very few people that spoke in such a way. So thank you for what you're doing for the children that you work with. Give this man a round of applause. On that note, any other questions? We did cover a lot here. Is any or even thoughts? Do you have a comment or anything that's going through your mind? Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'm coming around with the mic.
So we've talked a lot about the diploma. Curious, I've never seen it myself, frankly. What is the goal? You mentioned like you're starting to roll out choose your own adventure type. You're gonna like cater it to different industry. Is there an overarching goal that you're trying to get everybody to accomplish by the time they're done at the 10 weeks? Is it just like being able to make a Bitcoin transaction, read an Explorer?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Thank you, stranger. No, Ryan and also Billy over there, they're old friends, and they know all about my barefoot tendencies. He's like, stop, get to my question. Yeah, so when they finish the class, then a very tangible thing is they should all be able to make a Bitcoin transaction and understand the process of what's happening when they make that transaction. But a less tangible outcome, harder to quantify and measure, but is actually the mission. The mission isn't for more people to make Bitcoin transactions. The mission is for more people to be empowered. So what we hope to do is when a student finishes the course is they realize how much further they have to go on their own journey. But it's a journey that they're going to have to lead themselves on, right? Or maybe there's going to be other programs that could do it, but it's not going to be with us. We want to help people take the first step. We don't want it to be the final step. We want it to be the first step. So our goal, besides tangible outcomes that we could measure, is to spark curiosity in the individual that leads to them being sovereign.
Thanks.
Can you just go over how you get more involved? Like, is it through the website, GitHub? How does that happen? And then the same question, I guess, of just about accessing the information, like the actual curriculum.
Yeah, so to get more involved, it's probably on our website, which is myfirstbitcoin.io. And on there, you could find out if you wanted to join the Node network, if you were an educator yourself or part of a group of educators that you might be interested in joining that network. There's more information there, how to apply. If you wanted to be a volunteer, there's a volunteer intake form. If you wanted to donate, there's a finance tab that shows where money comes from and how we spend it. We try to be very transparent with that. And, there's a QR code to donate. If you wanted to, what are other ways that you could plug in? If you wanted to help create curriculum, that might start getting into the volunteer part. But yeah, basically on the website, you should be able to find out more of anything. The ways off the top of my head that I think to contribute is either joining the network, donating money, or donating skills or time to volunteer. And for all of that, I mean, you could talk to me tonight, but you should be able to find out a lot of those answers on the website. And like, if you want to translate, so this is all about the community. Like, we actually, so much of what we do and so much of our philosophy is just to create frameworks, and the community fills it in, right? So this book here has been translated or is in the process of being translated into, I honestly don't even know, but 24 or 26 languages. We do it in English and Spanish. And then if you want to do it in some other language, then you could reach out to us. Maybe we know somebody who's already working on it, and we'll just kind of link you guys, put you together. But for almost everything that we do, our job ends at creating frameworks. Like, by design, right? We're not trying to hold people's hands through the whole journey. We're actually just trying to make it easier for people to realize that they don't need to hold anybody's hand. So yeah, on the website, or tonight with me. But
So for some perspective as well, this last year, I know John's a modest guy, and I don't think he'll sort of emotionally divulge just how much of an impact it's had, though he has seen it in person across the world. I spent this last year traveling across many continents for Bitcoin, and the amount of people I've met who use this program, communities that are transformed, people who feel a genuine sense of hope as a result of it. And I say that in partially because I'm like, yeah, go donate, all that stuff. But also, I would recommend potentially even like challenging yourself with maybe going through it, teaching it to someone else, something like that, just as a way to get involved. It's sort of like it's a good overview. It's always good to sort of remind yourself of the fundamentals and all of that kind of stuff, and even might be a little bit of a reminder of like why Bitcoin is important. Sometimes we all get a little wrapped up in number go up and that other stuff, but it's a reminder of the broader application of the technology and who it can serve. But the impact that it's had globally, I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've spoken with a lot of people who are teachers. It's brought me to tears on many occasions, and but more than giving them obviously the best money the world has ever seen or whatever, catalyzing change in their lives. People who have stopped drinking, who spend more time with their children, people who feel that the future is now hopeful, that they're saving something for their family, and I've seen this in some of the worst areas in the world. I was recently in the largest slum in Africa on the whole continent, and they're using this as part of their curriculum in that place. I don't like using the word slum, informal settlement, but it's truly remarkable what it's doing. And as John said, and I will stress, the community support dynamic is what keeps it what it is, right? So they're not accountable to a government, to an organization. They can continue to do things the way that they want to do it. They also have one of my favorite people in Bitcoin is a woman named Reina Chicas. She works for them, and please keep Reina employed. She's one of my favorite people on planet Earth. So, and follow her on Twitter. She's amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to stress that side of this equation. We talked about what he's accomplished, technically all that stuff, but I've seen it with my own two eyes. It has had a tremendous impact on the world, and it will continue to have an exponential impact on the world, and that's up to us to sort of continue to fund that what it is and what it's become. So just want to sort of make sure I drive that point home before we start wrapping up here.
yeah, and we're a vehicle, right? Like our success and our failure, if that ever comes, I'm not trying to be like, oh, if we fail, it's not my fault. But our success and our failure is very much based on the community rather than what myself or Raina or somebody else in the organization will do. Because without the community, we're just a couple of crazy people that think that this matters, right? But with the community, we could change the world, right? And that's how important community support is. It goes from a crazy, just another crazy idea that means nothing, or a different future. That's how stark the difference is between, the community supporting it or not.
And to further that note, I think a board member, Jeff Booth, something he said earlier this year, and I'll reiterate it, I wrote a piece on it, but the idea that we are Bitcoin sounds counterintuitive because it's this protocol that sort of operates independently of us, but we're the ones who plug in the nodes, we're the ones who teach other people about it, we're the ones who contribute to programs like Me Premier Bitcoin, who then further what Bitcoin is and who it impacts. Just something to keep in mind, something to, I think, to hopefully take away from this, that, there's people doing. Yeah, please.
And to teach, right? So it's not just like, yeah, please donate. But that's not it, right? Like there's so much more that you could do. You could teach your own. You could teach yourself. But we're all microeducators, right? If you care about somebody close to you learning about Bitcoin, teach them. Don't wait for it to be easier. Actually, we'll try to make it easy, right? But you still have to take it that final mile. But we'll try to create the material and the frameworks to make it easier. But you are the one that has to bring it over the finish line, and that is very much by design, because we are trying to encourage a world in which we all realize that we're capable, right? So in order to do that, we can't, it needs to be this hybrid sort of thing. We want to help you get started, but we want you to finish it. And that's whether you're a student or an educator. That's like no matter where you are on the spectrum, we want to empower you.
I think that's actually probably the best place to leave it right there, right? We won't do that. And I also want to make sure everybody gets a chance to hopefully speak with John, if you don't mind hanging out for a little bit, in true John fashion, sort of unconference fashion, that we all get to talk to each other a little bit afterwards. Daniel, anything that I should
That's
add?
a great place to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, John. And Frank, for putting this together. Really appreciated this conversation tonight. And
Our pleasure. Thank you guys. Thank you guys all for coming. Appreciate it. Let's hang out.
Also, so we normally don't do our Bitcoin events on Mondays. We still have one on Thursday this week, so we'd like to see
An amazing
all of you
one.
here for that. We have Human Rights Foundation coming back. Evan Mawarire, who is a pastor from Zimbabwe who led a citizens movement against the dictatorship there. He has an amazing story to tell, and would love to have you here for that as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Make sure you tip your bartenders.
Well done. Thank you guys.